Welcome everyone to the Wall Street Journal. Thanks so much for joining us. With the 4th season of HBO's Game of Thrones about to begin, we wanted to hear from you, the passionate fans, about your focus on the show and what factors make you pay attention to it and keep coming back to the books, the show, and every aspect of Game of Thrones fandom. Joining me here is Marshall Crook. By day, he is a video producer here at the Journal, but he also recaps Game of Thrones for us on the WSJ's Speakeasy blog. Marshall, why don't we start the conversation with you? What are you looking forward to in the 4th season?
Just whatever new little building or castle pops up out of the map that I haven't seen yet. It's really weird in my house whenever something new pops up, I'll just shake my wife uncontrollably. We're going to River Run now. And but I think that just speaks to the fact that I have read the books, and so my experience is informed by reading the books, and so when the show goes in a new direction, I have some understanding of where it's going. You know, what experience are you bringing individually to the show, and what are you looking forward to in this new season?
This is, I think, going to be one of the last seasons where you can really predict where the story is going. There's a lot of big events that are coming up from the book, and then after this, it's kind of up in the air where the producers are going to take the story. There's going to be a lot of options. There's going to be a lot of choices and cuts to make. So this season is really, to me at least, the one where a lot of the most exciting things that you can look forward to are actually going to happen when you expect them to.
I had read the first 2 books, and then I just sort of decided to not continue reading the books because I like being surprised. For the first 2 seasons, I knew what was going to happen, and there is that sort of excitement, like I can't wait for this to happen, but there is that sort of, I don't know, there's a more pure form of I really don't know what's going to happen. And I also like that I don't have to nitpick at things, you know, when they don't go exactly how they went in the book. To me, being a fan, the way I interpret it is, you know, when you like something and it inspires you to create something. You know, I blog about geek fashion, and that shows one of the reasons I started doing that. You know, because something like Game of Thrones inspires other people to create beautiful things. My very first post on my Fashion Plus Geekery blog was about this Helmut Lang Game of Thrones collection. You know, so it's like designers are geeks just like us. And it's just, you know, it's just further proven that it's gone from being this sort of niche, I was talking to Marshall about this niche culture, to being really mainstream.
Right. You see a broadening of the world that's out there.
Sorry, I just wanted to add to that point about sort of being a niche versus mainstream. So for me, I started reading the books many years ago, so I have sort of a different experience. I've read the book series multiple times.
Let's be clear, you also made an app.
Yes,
about the
many years
characters.
ago, I made an app that's a reference guide to Game of Thrones, so I'd probably rate myself as a 7 out of 10 in terms of fandom. But for me, it was an experience that a bunch of my guy friends, we all read the books, we talk about Game of Thrones like it's football, right? We just love it. But now with the show, my wife, who hates fantasy and sci-fi, is actually really into it, and it's something that we can talk about. And so it's really interesting to see how it's become a lot more mainstream than it was, than the series was years ago.
Let's hold that thought because we have.
Yeah, this is a bait and switch. I'm not actually very interesting.
We have a late addition.
But John Bradley, who plays Sam Tarley on Game of Thrones, is really interesting.
You are in town for premiere festivities around
yeah.
the 4th season coming through.
Yeah.
Why don't you talk a little bit about your interaction with fans? You've been working on the show for a few years now.
Yeah.
And interacting with fans all around the way in the real world. What kind of things have you learned from them about not just your character, but the show itself?
Well, the interesting thing about when we started season 1 of this show, it was slightly different from the majority of TV shows that begin, because we had an established fan base already. We had the fans of the books. And what can happen when you have that is you've already got a certain bedrock of support who will watch the show. You've got ratings kind of in the bag of people who've loved the books and will watch the show. But then also you have a lot more people to let down.
Yeah.
Because all these people have an expectation of the show, whereas if it was just an original idea that was going straight to TV, there'd be no expectation of it. So you can really kind of hit the ground running and play about. But we had to fulfill so much expectation because these fans have been waiting for this show for such a long time. And it seems to me, when I say everybody that I've met has been almost overwhelmingly positive about it. That's not an exaggeration at all. That's everybody just seems to be so pleased with it. Then we've got such a wave of new support, but the bedrock support of the book fans have really gone along with it as well.
So if for anyone here, if you saw John walking down the street and decided to ambush him, what would be a question or
It's good that I know this. It's good that I know what will happen just so I can
right, I know.
myself
We're
for it.
preparing you.
Yeah.
Who has a question that they might ask John if they happen to see him on the street?
I feel like most people would just ask, so when are you going to die?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. With Sam, I always think that when you think about Game of Thrones, you think of huge, spectacular deaths where people get set on fire or people get ran through with swords. I think Sam's more likely to die of some kind of genetic heart defect or something. Instead of dying in battle, he's going to die running to battle. So I think Sam won't die a hero's death. Sam will die because of some kind of literal heartache. Literal and metaphorical heartache.
What's your favorite thing about playing Sam?
Well, the thing I love about playing Sam is you get to play somebody who's fundamentally good, and someone fundamentally who will instinctively always do the right thing, and there's no subtext to him, there's no ulterior motive to what he does. And I think not only in a show that deals with so much underhandedness and so much kind of Machiavellian going behind people's backs and being a bit deceitful like that, but also in a world where that happens all the time. People say one thing but mean another all the time. It's so nice to play somebody who's just so straight down the line. Nice. It's a very, very comfortable place to go back to. For the last 4 years now. Kind of like a little holiday from any kind of cynicism, I suppose.
Could you play evil if you wanted to?
I think I could. I'd like to sometimes, just to see if I could do it. But I'm perfectly happy to stick with Mr. Nice Guy for now.
Do you think Sam has made you a nicer person?
He probably has, because he's given me a greater understanding of vulnerability in people. And the thing about Sam that makes him, you feel for him so much, is that when he arrived at Castle Black, his situation was so utterly impossible. He had no choice. He could only move away from his family and move into this horrible environment or die. And once you realise that, that's when you really start to feel that he's in a totally impossible situation. And he's been treated very, very badly by the world. And once you start to inhabit that person all the time, you really start to get a bit of a feeling for what it's like to be that vulnerable.
I'm curious, there are so many characters in this universe of Game of Thrones, and we're only beginning to see on the show those reflected, the ones that are in the book. I'm curious, do you guys have favorite characters? I'm sure John won't take offense if Sam isn't your favorite character.
I will.
In fact. Do you think of the show in those kind of terms, where someone you're rooting for or not rooting for, or is it more of a level playing field for you?
Sure, I'll go. I guess I have to say my favorite character is Tyrion Lannister.
Yeah.
You know, he comes across, I just heard some people say, because they wanted to say that. But, you know, he has kind of like a hard exterior, but, you know, that deep down he is actually one of the characters that's kind of a good guy, I guess, if there are very many good guys in the show. And he also has, he's obviously one of the most intelligent characters, and he has a great wit.
Yeah.
You know, so definitely Tyrion. I actually like Tywin a lot in the show as well. He's actually one that I like more in the show than the books.
Yeah.
And Sam.
Oh yeah, of course, and Sam.
I had to throw that in there.
Yeah.
Keeping it within the Lannister family, I think Jaime's really interesting.
Yeah.
Slightly evil, but maybe not. And we're starting to see different sides of him. I think it's interesting to see him become more of a complex character than what we originally thought from the first episode.
I think if we're going to deal in polar opposites, Sam and Jaime are about as far apart as you can get. I've always found Jaime fascinating coming from a Sam point of view, because although Jaime is morally pretty reprehensible, he always walks into any situation believing himself to be the best person there. Even when, just probably the way Nikolai played him, even when you're tied to a stake in a sack covered in mud, he still exudes a kind of latent power and a latent charisma almost. And Sam walks into any situation and instantly feels like the absolute dog's body of the situation. So it's always interesting to find once you find a character in a story that's almost a mirror image, a direct opposite of your character, then you start to feel your own characters struggle a little bit more.
I try not to get too attached because I assume everyone I love is going to die. But if I had to pick one, I've always really loved Arya. I mean, you want to cheer for the kind of tomboy. You're always rooting for her, like the underdog in many respects, which is so funny because Maisie Williams, who plays her, is like the most adorable, like girly, super girliest, most fashionable person. When you see her, it's like the frilliest, most pastel colored dresses. Yeah, she's fantastic. I also actually kind of love Marjorie Tyrell. I feel like she knows how to play the game, and I love how it pisses Cersei off so much. It's my favorite. The interactions there.
Yeah, those interactions between them two, quite often silent and quite often wordless little kind of looks out the corner of the eye. You can see that absolute a kind of internal contempt and envy cocktail that Cersei feels for Marjorie. Yeah, I mean, I think that the women in this show are exemplary in terms of writing for women. One of the things that people have said about Shakespeare, the reason why Shakespeare still continues to be so popular, is that his understanding of the psychology of women is pretty astute. Mm-hmm. And I think from a male point of view, throughout history, males have struggled to write for women.
Really strong female characters,
because a lot of male authors have a kind of latent misogyny where any kind of women they like, any women they write, is a kind of reflection of how they want women to be. And I think the great writers find a way of making women, if not on the surface of it, at least underneath, in a kind of cryptic way, the most powerful characters in the show. Yeah. I mean, just the fact that Joffrey is the king, but it's his mother who tells him everything. She wears the trousers in that relationship, so he's just a figurehead. He's her puppet, and this woman can make him do pretty much whatever she wants.
So switching gears a little bit, John, the show is famous for just being all over the world in terms of the actual production.
That's right.
Maybe give us a sense of where you found yourself during production, geographically and just in the scene. I know some of the scenes you had to shoot over the years have been pretty tough going in terms of the environment.
Really
mud and
tough
cold
going,
and everything.
I mean, when we were in Iceland, I hear that you guys just had a really bad winter here in New York, and when I've heard about it, I've been sympathetic. I've been surface sympathetic.
And yet.
But on the other hand, I think I've been as cold as I'm ever going to be. I said to another actor when we were on the location, I said, if I'm ever this cold again, something's gone wrong. And I mean, something's gone badly wrong in life if I'm ever this cold again. But there was a moment where we started, the pre-credit sequence of season 3 is a shot of Sam still being pursued by White Walkers, still running through the snow. And that was one of the most exhausting things I've ever had to do, because not only the snow was that deep, so you're not really walking on the ground, you're walking on compacted snow. And if you've got me and a lot of costume and a lot of all the other stuff, and all the just to make it worse, just all the stuff they put in my hair weighs a good few pounds. So I find myself being driven into the ground like a tent peg sometimes. And I had to, because of the way we shoot, I had to shoot this in like 30-second bursts and then reset and do it again. In theory, Sam has been running through that snow for 12 hours. And I was exhausted and Sam wasn't. So to find out that you're not as fit as Samwell Tarly is, in theory, is just one of life's most devastating moments, really.
Does everyone have any questions about where Sam's character is headed in terms of his transformation from coward to hero? Or maybe that was the question.
Sounds like a question to me. Well, so what's the thing about Sam is that he's always the last person. He will always be the last person to acknowledge how brave he is. I think that from the second he walked onto the screen, people sensed there was something more about him than what he was projecting. There has to be a hidden worth to somebody like that, or there wouldn't be any point in the character. See what I mean? So I think that Sam's always the last person to acknowledge that he's any good at all. But I think killing some White Walkers and saving the woman he loves and saving her baby, I think that's all the indication that you need, that you're a pretty good guy. So maybe going into season 4, he's starting to just acknowledge it a little bit more.
John, have you read the books, and do you know where your character's heading?
I've just about read the books now, but the thing about, the problem with trying to second guess how the show is going to work is that you can't get attached to anything. You read ahead in the books and you know that we've got to condense that book into 10 hours of TV. So just through time constraints alone, we have to hack things out and get rid of certain bits. So there's no way that you can get attached to anything that just might not make it into the show. So I think by now we've got into season 4, the books and the show are kind of living a bit independently of each other. They've become their own entity, if you like, and they're starting to have less and less in common. So I think once you've established that that's the show and that's the book, you can start to enjoy each of them independently of the other one.
Was there something from the book, something Sam related that they cut out of the show that you were upset about?
I would have liked Cold Hands, if at all possible, and just through the kind of marketing of the series, I think a lot of people thought that when Sam kills the White Walker, I think that people thought that was going to be Cold Hands, but Cold Hands doesn't really play a part in the show. And there are some things that I think people will be expecting to be in this series, in this season 4, that may not happen, or if they do happen, won't happen until future series. So the books and the show are becoming so separate, you can't really second guess anything, really.
How did you find out about the Red Wedding?
Well, we get all the scripts quite early on. We get the scripts a couple of months in advance of shooting. And then I read them all and I know what's going to happen. And then you have to forget about the rest of it. You have to then focus on Sam and John, or Sam and Gilly. So I knew that it was going to happen, obviously, but then when you see it brought to the screen and you see it visualized so brilliantly and acted so well, I only saw that when the world saw it. I only saw that on broadcast. So it was more like a communal experience. And I was still shocked by it. I knew it was going to happen. But it's a bit like the bit where Stringer Bell is shot in The Wire, because those... Oh, don't tell me you've not got that far. Oh, come on. It's about 10 years ago.
I know, it's on my list.
Unbelievable. So anyway, Stringer Bell gets shot in The Wire, right? And you don't... Because that character's so huge and his presence is so huge... Okay, he doesn't. His presence is so huge. When people like that die in shows, you can't really believe it's true. There's a moment where you think, oh, this is probably like a joke and they're going to come back next episode, and then they don't. And then you realise that that's the end of it. But the tricky thing is for us, we're not only saying goodbye to characters, we're saying goodbye to colleagues as well, and people that we've known and people that we've been acting around for 3 years. So that becomes a kind of double whammy of a sucker punch, really. To say goodbye to not only Rob, but Richard as well, and not only Catelyn but Michelle as well, and Una and all those guys. It's always very hard, but we're shedding people all the time. We should be used to it by now. We should be used to it by now. There's always big goodbyes at wrap parties.
Any other
Who are you most sad to see go?
People that I've acted with, or just anybody. To lose James Cosmo was huge for us because we're all kind of young guys and we're quite new to the industry and a bit green and a bit... Sometimes the size of the thing can overwhelm you a little bit, and it's always nice to have somebody there who's a bit of an old hand, who has done it all before, been in huge things, who's there to a bit of a kind of mast to steady the ship. And to lose him, we lost as much of a kind of father figure in James as the Night's Watch lost in Mormont. It was very, very sad to see him go. And that's thinking about it, just to return to the previous question about things that I would have liked to have been in the show. I think when Mormont dies in the books, he'd been cradled by Sam, and Sam kind of holds him as he dies. That's one of the type of things that would have been really nice, but we just didn't have the screen time to explore a relationship that would lead up to that moment. Certain scenes were written that would have laid the foundations for that, but in the end, just because we have 10 hours and no more, that had to go. But that was very sad. But I think the death of Mormont was as heart-wrenching as it could have been, really.
You're one of the few characters who have interacted and battled with the White Walkers on the show so far.
Oh, yes.
So I'm wondering if they've told you, if the producers have told you anything about how they appear on the show and any indications of how they might play a part in future episodes of the show.
Well, ever since the very start of our exposure to the Night's Watch in the show, the White Walkers have always been the main undercurrent of fear. I mean, the White Walkers were a character in the show before they were a physical presence in the show. They were referred to so often, and they influenced every single decision that was made by any member of the Night's Watch, that they've kind of always been there. It's only when you see them physically that they enter into the show. But I think that as long as the Night's Watch are there, the White Walkers will play a huge part. But it's amazing to act opposite that kind of, act in those sequences, because a lot of people think that the White Walker image is mainly CGI, but it's actually a prosthetic costume. It's actually a rubber latex costume. So to do things like that with a figure in the scene like that, I relish that kind of stuff. And there's a moment when we were shooting the scene where Sam kills the White Walker, when I was standing there watching Ross Mullen, the guy who does all the prosthetic stuff, just appearing and then disappearing through the trees coming towards me. I thought, this is going to be terrifying. And if you're terrified in a forest in Belfast at 2 in the morning with a big light and loads of grips and camera crew eating lunch, then if you're terrified knowing how connected to the real world you are there, then we knew that it was going to be a pretty terrifying moment on screen. I relish that kind of stuff. It's such a huge thing for Sam.
Well, John, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks to our audience for coming and the fans. We really appreciate your input.
My pleasure.
Looking forward to the new season.
Really hope you enjoy it.
Thank
Thanks
you
so
guys.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys, really.
Thank you.
This is awesome.